Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra and welcome to my channel. I want to show you guys how I made this. So this is a crew neck and I applied this, but I didn't show you this in the video, but I did show you that where I embroidered. I made this pocket for this crew neck and then I embroidered on it. And then this right here is a flannel shirt that I bought at a thrift store, and I added that to the crew neck, and I cut the cuffs off and I added these cuffs from the crew neck. So here in just a second we'll get started. So here I am at the table with the crew neck, and I'm going to cut that band off the bottom. So I'm going to nip it with those scissors, and then I'm going to cut all the way around. Those scissors ended up being too small, so I had to change, but I stay right above the seam, and I just cut all the way around that band. I'm coming to the end, cutting that band off. There's the band. And then I lay out the shirt, and I'm fixing to cut the sleeves off, and I'm going to stay just on the other side of that seam line. I'm just going to cut it because that whole section is going to be cut off here in a minute anyway, so it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to do the other sleeve. I'm going to cut it off. And I'm going to get the ruler, and I'm just going to cut up the side of that. Just cut it open. Make it open and even. Just that little piece. That's all I need to cut off. I'm going to do the other side. That design that's on there I did with my Luminaris. Now I'm gonna line that ruler up on the bottom of the crew neck, and I'm gonna trim that off, just make it even down on the bottom. Now I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to get the flannel shirt. I bought that flannel shirt at a thrift store, and I decide where I want to cut it, and I lay the ruler down so that I can get a straight line. I'll flip that over to the other side because I kind of want to get an estimate of how wide I need to make the other side, because I want them to be close. I just kind of eyeball it, but I would like for it to be close. So I lay my ruler down, and then I move that out of the way, and I can there I am cutting that side now. Now I lift the flannel up, and I'm going to cut a 2.5, 3-inch strip off of there for the pocket that I'm gonna make. I just cut that hem off the bottom because I'm not gonna need that. Now I've got a seam ripper and I'm ripping that little bit of pocket that was left on there off because I don't want that on there. Now I bring the crew neck back and I'm going to put that seam on the flannel shirt just a little below the seam on the crew neck, right side to right side. On the front, I just put that seam on the flannel just right underneath the seam on the crew neck. They're not lined up on top of each other. I've got the crew neck seam just a little under the seam on the crew neck. Just because I've tried it the other way and I think this way is better. Now, right side to right side, I've just pinned that, and now I'm gonna pin the back. I'm gonna bring that right side around and pin those right sides together. I'm going to do the other side the same way. Opening it up, right side to right side. Put the seam just a little under the seam on the crew neck. Pin it, and then start pinning the front piece together, right side to right side. And then I'm going to pin the back, right side to right side. Now I'm going to go to the serger. That's where I'm at. I put it under the serger, and I make sure that those stay lined up all the way around. And I pull the pins out as I go because we don't want to run over our pins. And just sew all the way around it. And then you're going to sew all the way around the other side just the same way. Cut your thread, do the other side. And then I'm back at the table now. I'm going to flip that outside, the right side out. So there it is. I'm going to lay it out. And then I'm going to line up those seams on that flannel shirt because you're going to have to even the bottom up. So I line those seams up on those flannels, and I just put a clip to hold it for a minute until I do both sides. And then I'm just going to take the rotary cutter and cut those off and just make them straight across. So I'm just cutting it right there, straight across. And then I'm going to do the other side the same way. Now I'm going to cut the cuffs off of the flannel shirt because I'm going to use the cuffs from the the crew neck. So you could leave those if you wanted to, but I like the cuffs off the crew neck, so I'm cutting those off. And there I cut the second one off. Now I'm gonna take the seam off of that band because you don't want to be sewing over that thick seam. So I just cut all the way around it, and I cut the seam off of the band. Oh, wait, no. Right there, I'm actually cutting the cuffs off of the sleeves. That's what I'm doing there, cutting the cuffs off the sleeves. And I just stay above the seam line. And then right here, I'm actually cutting that seam off now. And I do that on both of them. I cut the seam off of both of the bands for the cuffs. And now I'm gonna cut the seam off of that. That's the band. And there's the seam, throw it away. Now I'm gonna make the pocket for the front, and that's just a sleeve. So I take part of the sleeve and I just cut it to whatever size I think's good. There's no right or wrong there, however you want to do it. I think mine was 8 to 9 inches. And then I'm going to cut the seam out of it. So I just cut along that seam line. And then I'm going to cut the seam off. Now I'm putting that fabric that I cut off the flannel, I'm laying that down on the bottom. But I did even the bottom of that pocket up. So I took the ruler and I laid it across it, and I evened that up. But here I'm just laying out the trim that I'm gonna sew on there. So that's my pocket, and I'm gonna sew the trim on the edges. Now I'm at the serger, and I'm gonna sew those on. So I just put them under the pressure foot, and I sew straight down. I'm gonna do the other side. Now I'm going to open them up, and I just turn that to the part that I serged. So I just turn it and line it up with that part that I serged, and then I fold it over, and then I pin it. There it is. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew across that. And I just stay right at the edge of the blue and sew straight down it. I use matching thread. Right here I'm using black thread because black goes with the crew neck and it goes with the flannel. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. I had the camera in front of me and I bumped it, and that kind of, there I'm showing it to you. And I'm gonna sew the other side, and then I'm going to trim those ends off. Here I am sewing the other side. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Be sure to pull your pins out. That's where I'm trimming those ends off. Just making them even, straight across. Now I'm going to fold that top down, and I'm going to pin it. And I just fold it down just a little bit to make a seam across there. Maybe a quarter or half an inch. And then I'm just going to sew straight down that. And I stay right on the edge. And that's a 1/4 inch foot, so. I back stitch at the beginning and the end. And there's my pocket. Now I'm going to embroidery on the pocket because I want it to say blessed. And here I am, it's embroidered on my embroidery machine. Now I'm back at the table and I'm going to take the hoop off. I've got cutaway and tearaway stabilizer on there, so I'm going to cut away the cutaway first. And then I'm just going to tear it away. Now I'm laying out the pocket, and I'm over at the machine, and I'm going to just sew that onto the shirt. I just stay right on the edge, and I try to sew on the same line that I sewed on before. Back stitch. Now I'm back over at the table and I'm getting ready to work on the cuffs. Or no, actually I am sectioning the bottom. I'm making 4 quadrants for the band that's going to go around the bottom so that I can spread that band out equally whenever I put it on here in a minute. So I'm just making little notches there just a little tiny notch on each of those 4 quadrants. Now I lay it back out, and I'm gonna make 4 quadrants out of the band. So that's the seam there, and then I'm just gonna make it even and put a pin in so that I have 4 equal quadrants on that band. Now I'm going to line up those quadrants with the quadrants that I made on the shirt. So I'm going to put the band on, and I'm going to pin it at those 4 spots. That one goes to the middle. So I'm lining up the bottom of the band with the bottom of the shirt, and I'm just putting it at each one of those places that I made, put the pin in the little notches. Now I'm going to add a couple of pins to those pockets, or that pocket that I made, just so that I can keep it straight and in line with my band. I don't actually connect it to my band. I'm just trying to keep it straight. Now I'm going to take it over to the serger and sew around it. Here I am at the serger, and I'm stretching the band so that it's tight against the fabric underneath, the shirt that's underneath. I want to hold that kind of tight so that it is lined up. So I hold it where that pin was at to keep it so that the fabric stretches evenly around the shirt. I just keep the shirt and the band lined up straight, and I just serge around it. And I come over where I started a little ways, and then I cut the threads. Here I'm going to put a pin on the opposite side of the band there so that it's in 2 quadrants, basically. I don't do 4 on the armbands because they're just so small. Here I'm just putting a pin where I cut that cuff off, and there's a button there, so there's a little opening. I just put a pin in there to hold that closed. Now I'm going to cut both sides of the, I'm going to notch both sides of the cuff so that I know where the two sides are going to go whenever I put that cuff on. So now I'm going to put the cuff on, and I'm going to line this two seams up. So the seam on the cuff and the seam on the flannel shirt sleeve, I'm lining those two up together, right side to right side, and then I'm going to pin it, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to line up the pin and the notch that I put in the cuff. And pin it. And there I'm just stretching it to make sure it's, you know, fitting in there like it should. Off camera, I do go over to the machine and I sew that, where that button is, I sew just straight across, just to put a little seam there and close it off so that it's not opening up on me when I'm putting the cuff in. And now I'm back at the serger, and I'm gonna serge around that cuff. Just serge around it, and then you're gonna do the other side same way. I'm just holding the flannel and the cuff where that pin is so that it's stretched where it needs to be stretched. And now just sew around it. The cuffs are identical. You do them both the same. There's the second cuff. Sewing around it. There was a little thread there on that button that I was cutting off. And there's the finished shirt. Later, I did add some parts.